The infinite monadic point outside of time-space, known as the primordial emanation, expands into the 7 directions of north, east, south, west, above, below, and center, and thus derives the septenary dimensions, creating expansive space. It then self-references and distinguishes itself, becoming self-aware, and therefore polarizes itself through a primordial distinction. The polarization of primordial emanation could be seen as a trinity, as 2 poles synthesize and generate electricity, geometrically spatialized as a generative triangle, which refracts pure invisible light into the visible chromatic light spectrum. Geometry is generated through the teleological vectors administered by consciousness, and from 1, the law of 7. The 3 is derived, and from 3, 7 is derived. From the 7 points of expansion arise the 7 Hermetic Principles of mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, gender, and cause and effect, with the 8th principle of love uniting the entire spectrum. The universal intelligence matrix is a self-replicating mind. It stacks itself on itself through self-inferring reflection. It is the God boson, the hyper-electron. Though in order to become manifest as a body, a primordial distinction must take place. And the prerequisite for primordial distinction is separation. Here the fermions come into manifestation as the primordial awareness separates from itself and creates bipolarization. Perception requires duality. As these separated poles begin to dance around each other, sound is generated and the universe comes into play. Universal fission is the motion that generates the electron, and through it compartmentalized life units are born as individual fractals of the 7 and begin the journey of ascent through the electrical universe back into pure light. The circle has no beginning or end. Therefore, it is 0, and it cycles infinitely, so it is infinite. But it is only one thing, that is, a circle. There is simply one infinite number that produces itself limitlessly. The universe is a limitless generator. Universal fission is the subdivision of infinitude into finite remnants that are themselves infinite. Just like nuclear fission and the splitting of atoms, this fragmentation leads to electricity. Therefore, the universe is an electrico ecosystem. Ergo, polarity is 3, 2 poles, and electricity. What all this means is that we are a free-range consciousness counterforcing itself through limitless boundaries. We are all acting as a counterforce upon one another's mental creation. That's the only way reality can solidify. Impulses from one monad are counteracted by the impulses of another monad, and they cancel each other out, forming a stacked interference pattern. This is what creates the objective world. The stacking of information leads to frequency, which is the motion of energy perturbing as the phenomenal world. Everything is stacked information. Consider a leaf. It has color, shape, texture, and growth. The ontology of a geometrically intelligent universe, wherein information is carried via the medium of photon, streaming as free electromagnetic vectors through a hypostasis of density, is a universally accepted basis. From the point of primordial distinction rises life, as the God boson of the divine photon motions into the polarized electron, light travels, and as such is animated as life. Life is light in motion. The primordial distinction refracting into polarity is the universal fission generating individuation. From the seven, the law of three is derived, and from three, the seven. The trinity of polarization, derived from the primordial distinction of universal fission, manifests spatially as the three stars of Orion's belt. The dimensionalization of light into geometric modules of pressurized capacity is outwardly manifest as the seven sisters of the Pleiades, where all biological life is adorned in their garments of evolution. The universe is a self-caused, self-existing, self-reflecting intelligence matrix. Its inner reflections modulate effulgent tessellations of breathing, self-aware, self-organizing quanta. These quanta stack or repulse in a harmonious dance of assembly. Bosons can stack and fermions repulse. All motion and quanta in the universe follow the Hermetic laws of self-existing awareness. The operations of human psychology, religion, and society correspond with the operations of subatomic particles. The exact functions of subatomic particles are mimicked in human endeavor. When we observe the law of correspondence and the set correspondence between the mind and the subatomic fields, and consider the social and politico-religious structure of civilization and how individual personalities function, develop, and cooperate, we perceive of the similitude between the operant and the operation. In the quantum field, it is observed that certain subatomic particles cannot occupy the same space. In fact, they repulse one another. These particles are called fermions. Protons are a type of fermion. Correspondingly, in society, we see egos and shadows repulsing one another and grappling for positions in business and peer groups. There are religions like paganism and Abrahamism that are based on division and the exaltation of Godhead figures. We see corporate giants capitalizing off of socialist dividends in capitalistic countries. The humans operating under the quantum functions of fermions are known as terrestrials or hyletics. They make up about 60 to 70% of the population. There are also a type of subatomic particle called boson. These particles have the ability to synthesize, synergize, and stack atop one another. They can occupy the same space. Photon are a type of boson. Correspondingly, in society, we see group minds working together, where collectives actually think through each other's minds, combining their will through synergy. We see religions such as Buddhism and Hinduism, where the premise is unity and oneness, and we see the political systems of communism. The humans operating under the quantum functions of boson are known as psychics. They make up about 20 to 30% of the population. These particles are affected by gravity, and it is gravity that causes many of their functions. They are different expressions of matter and dark matter. However, there is a third type of operant upon the quantum fabric. This is the antimatter. Correspondingly, beings associated with this antimatter are non-matrix entities and are associated with the beyond existence and non-existence alike. They are radiant agents of the antimatter, and we could equate them with the pleroma or invisible light universe. These beings are known as pneumatics or the illuminated, and are not ruled by the quantum field, but by the spiritual. These are the game players. Life doesn't just happen to these units. They bring change and are active, holy, and operative. There aren't many at all, ranging around 12% of the population. Human endeavor is orchestrated by the fluctuating gyrations of subatomic field atoms until the invisible light universe emanates its ray upon the human cell or germ. This illumination reveals the human life unit and its psychosocial operations from the quantum field's grapple. Every particle has either a positive or electrical charge, or a magnetic or negative charge, or both. And these particles signal a certain frequency. The frequency of particles attunes them to other particles that emit the same frequency. And this affinity between particles attracts them to one another, where they meet and copulate into higher frequencies. Waves interact into transforms, merge and cause interference that induces evolution. This is a great chain of being that causes the male and female, positive and negative particles to synthesize and transform into higher wave formations. The quantum principle and supersymmetry as the Hegelian dialectic consorts. The singularity is infinite, and the very similitude is the reconciliation of contradictories. This beautiful particle dance of electric and magnetic affinity is expressed through the human enterprise of human relationship, where the male and female archetypal human expressions seek out one another, where the internal seeks the external. Resonating poles of diametrically stringent counterpoles fluctuate, and the universe dances through supersymmetry. From the lowest point of development, the universal singularity experiences fission, the subdivision of its own holism into fragmented units, which occurs through anti-symmetry. This is experienced simply by infinitude segregating itself into finite particularized remnants, which themselves are still infinite, just a different form of infinity, limitlessness. So as this occurs, consciousness becomes individuated with an inbuilt teleology to attain symmetry and wholeness as a singularity. So as consciousness develops as an individualized realization, it seeks more of itself, and does so through fusion with its fragmented counterparts. This occurs first subjectively, and then, as it realizes itself on a greater level, it seeks union with other remnants. In the embryonic stages of consciousness, the state of awareness is usually of self-service, survival, and pleasure-pain seeking modes of expression. The initial fission of universal fragmentation leads to polyamorous conjunctions, i.e., remnants seek out multiple partners purely for the satisfaction of pleasure and feelings of connection. Pagan religions are also the result of this universal fission and have their place in truth. So, a universal descent of fission is expressed as a polyamorous, multi-partner, sexual ordeal of many gods. But as the remnants develop along the lines of subjective realization, self-integration, and actualization, we see universal fusion enacting. Then austere discipline, virtue, and other beautiful qualities and faculties begin to develop. This is where love begins to pop its head up, as the asymmetrical particularizations seek perfection through symmetry. Through the understanding of unity and love, monotheistic religions come into play. This is where monogamous relationships are sought out, and beautiful levels of commitment, self-control, and personal love sprout. As particles spin on their own axis, they leverage frequency, and in the case of fermions, they spin around one another. Correspondingly, we see through history world systems cycling as history repeats itself. We see people repeating patterns over and over, We see the sun rotating around the planet as the planet spins. And if you were to look at yourself, you would see your life spiraling through cycles. The mind, when observed, appears to be made up of gyrations of consciousness. Every individual is a holonomic fractal existing within a holonomic collective thought field. The fractal is the entire reality of an individual. It is a comprehensive, multilateral, omnicentric, multidimensional torsion, a panoramic boundary of cinematic rendition, comprising all of the experiential and situational phenomena. It is malleable, permeable, social, intricate, conductive, and hyperelectric. It can be compressed, expanded, quaked, amplified, antagonized, resized, rewired, recharged, refined, redefined, discharged, dissolved, illuminated, darkened, enlightened, and transmuted. The fractals are structurally conductive, parabolic, fibrous, crystalline, liquid light membranes. The collective thought field is a collective macro-neuronal hyperelectric network of wave vectors conducted as a universal intelligence matrix, where free-range electrical currents are magnetized by the sonar vibrations of individuated holonomic fractals. What has just been explained is the monad. The monad is both the collective thought field and the individuated fractal, or the macrocosm and microcosm respectively. Each reality fractal, or monad, is a field of multilateral engagement. It is a gradational temporal field made up of a stratum of wavelengths. These wavelengths are electromagnetic planes that function through the Hermetic Principles. Visualize a stratum of wavelengths stacking as concentric spheres, each sphere representing a world. Every individual is one of these stratums of concentric wavelengths, and every individual wavelength stratum telepathically interplays one with another. When you observe an atom and you delve deep into its makeup, farther and farther in, it appears to have no center. The innermost interior is but empty space. In other words, there is no center, and the solidity of anatomic structure is revealed as an illusion of fixed perception. Moving up in speculation toward the mind, it is apparent and experiential that the mind generates audio holographic textures, images, archetypal anecdotes, entire situational and circumstantial arrangements of information. Observing these generative simulations, the observer can never observe itself. It appears that the empty space which occupies the center of the atom is an unobservable phenomena, or an ontological immateriality. Through logical deduction, it may be apparent that in fact the center of the atom is mind, and the atom is but a holographic projection. When studying the quantum field, they were unable to determine whether they were observing waves or particles, so they called it ether. This is where the term ether comes from. When spirit is compressed, it becomes a particle that begins to expand as a wave, and piezoelectricity is generated. This is ether. From this, the electromagnetic substratum is established. Particles refract into quantified gradations, and the strata of the multidimensional interface streams. The stream of information between dimensional domains emanates images, and the geometric lattice is set into motion. Alchemy became chemistry when the component of consciousness was omitted from the practice. The secret to alchemical transmutation lies in the application of Hermetic principles. Just as the quantum field with all of its laws and dynamics is affected by and made up of wave particles of consciousness, So must the initiate realize this and impress their consciousness upon the quantum fields and apply the Hermetic principles. You can do anything if it corresponds with the parameterized law of universal geometry. The dimensions you access are contingent upon geometric modules unlocking higher geometric modules, and the higher affects the lower. Ergo, you can manipulate the dimensional fields below you, but not the dimensional fields above. Geometric conjugation is the wave modulation of electrical emission. Therefore, in the metaphysical field, we see immaterial cross-sections of perception generating the optical material of cosmic fiber that assembles the temporal fabric of space. This being the premise of virtual synergy that persists the collective thought form of the holographic universe. The quantum chessboard is made up of the symmetrically vectored electrical discharges of mind. It is a holographically assembled time-space lattice. It is affected by the wave conjugations of overlapping consciousness that manifest as scalar points of information. As consciousness scintillates across this lattice, it does so in the form of vectors. Vectors are scalar waves with a teleological direction. Cosmic vectors that are part of cosmological attractors take on the form of numeric sequences. Numeric sequences are telepathic, telekinetic, living, breathing, geometric vortexes of reality fractals, or wormholes, that can be communicated with and entered into. There are both chaotic attractors and ordered attractors within the cosmic fields. When number sequences are telepathically interplayed, consciousness transports through them. In the same way that deep meditation turns the mind into a black hole and subatomic particles are rearranged and ordered into a sequence that spurs out the other side as a white hole, which creates a new density of matter, so are numeric sequences temporal uniforms that consciousness drapes. The quantum chessboard is comprised of cross-sections of multidimensional information. The dynamics of cosmic law exert through the quantum lattice's localized time variance. Each move that you make is a motion of psychokinetic cosmic momentum. Each move that you make alters temporal streaming and convolutes the vortex of transmission. Timelines are dimensional frequency bandwidths that are amalgamated through the conduit of wormholes. As you become conscious and the enterprise of cosmic generation is anchored, the actions you make determine the wormhole you ride. Fourth dimensional precipitation upon the third dimensional axis is directed through the conscious anchor of fifth dimensional sentience. Knowing which timeline is appropriate is determined by the guidance of the fifth dimensional electronic monad. The circular actions of will and energetic reverberations of spirit will take you to a cubic thought field or timeline. You are conducting the vectors of temporal transmission and repositioning. These vectors will either take you to a harmonic field or a discordant field, where you will be gifted expansion or face the fate of depletion, whereby the matrix siphons your energy and uses it against you. The whole goal of the quantum chessboard, or the Luciferian motherboard, is to win the game. When any choice towards sovereignty or service to others is espoused by any life unit, then the game begins. No life unit is exempt from the resisting dominance. When sovereignty is espoused, an impulse is emitted through the etheric plane via the illuminating biocircuitry, and the hegemonizing dark forces combat the ascendancy. The battle on the astral plane sets into motion, and the life unit begins its journey toward freedom. Those who resonate within the fourth dimensional bandwidths will be recycled during the next great day. The internet and monetary system are the conduits of the fourth dimension, expanding its tendrils into the third dimension. The mentality of fourth dimensional duplicitous surrogate is one of separation and conflictual antipode. Third dimensional bodies are groomed to host the fourth dimensional hive mind. They bring forward hatred amongst the masses. They generate fear and hatred between race. They hate the opposite sex. They find sanctuary in the duplicitous narrow-mindedness of faulty connection and ideology. All this they do so the human organism works against its true nature and loses control over its body. When all control is lost, the body becomes a host, a corpse of the former identity, animated by a cacodemon of the varying hive species, such as reptilian, insectoid, or apparition. All advancing souls are given the opportunity to ascend to the higher planes, but those who fail are embroiled by the grappling throttle of the matrix and become antagonistic agents upon the initiates. The higher in the planes where the failure takes place, the more antagonistic the fallen agent, and dependent upon the ray group will determine the activity of the antagonist. False spiritual teachers, black magicians, and temptresses are most prevalent upon the chessboard. The subatomic atmospheres and their combinatorial patterns are noetically sequenced. The magnetic fields and field atoms, as they spiral and travel as waves, are impressed upon by varying levels of consciousness, and the degree of quality defined through the essence of love or fear. As vectors are waves with a teleological direction influenced by the electromagnetic force of will, the physical universe is set into motion by this very application of will upon the subatomic and molecular through the subtle planes of force.